The massive crystal spires of the Galactic Council station gleamed under the light of 3 different suns. Inside the main testing facility, Ambassador Krell adjusted his breathing mask and looked down at the latest failure report. His 6 eyes scanned the holographic display showing the remains of what had once been a promising species called the Voltani. "How long did they last?" asked his assistant, a small blue creature named Pip. 47 seconds in the pressure chamber," Krell replied with a tired sigh. "Their bodies simply couldn't handle the compression. Another failure to add to the list." Pip made a note on his datapad. "That makes it 43,612 species that have failed the Crucible Protocol." Krell nodded slowly. The number was staggering, but not surprising. The galaxy was a dangerous place, filled with deadly radiation, crushing gravity wells, toxic atmospheres, and temperature extremes that could kill most life forms in seconds. How could primitive species hope to join the advanced galactic community if they couldn't even survive basic environmental challenges? The Crucible Protocol had been designed 3,000 years ago by the wisest minds in the galaxy. It was a series of 7 tests that pushed any species to their absolute limits. Atmospheric pressure changes that could crush bones or explode internal organs. Temperature swings from the heat of a star's surface to the cold of deep space. Radiation exposure that would sterilize entire planets. Gravity fields that could flatten mountains. Every species that had ever applied for membership in the Galactic Council had faced these tests. Every single one had failed. "Sir," Pip squeaked nervously, "we have another application." Krell's head tentacles drooped with exhaustion. "What species now?" "They call themselves humans. From a planet called Earth in the Outer Rim territories." Krell pulled up the preliminary data about this new species. Standard carbon-based mammals, bipedal, requiring oxygen and liquid water. Their world orbited a yellow star in one of the galaxy's quieter spiral arms. Nothing in their basic biology suggested they would be any different from the thousands of species that had tried and failed before them. "Physical capabilities?" Krell asked. "Average strength, average speed, average intelligence according to our initial scans," Pip reported. "Their technology is fairly primitive. They've barely begun exploring their own solar system." Krell studied the data more closely. Earth seemed like a typical life-bearing world, not too hot, not too cold, with reasonable gravity and a breathable atmosphere. These humans had probably never faced any real challenges in their comfortable little environment. "What about their society?" Krell asked. "Divided into many smaller groups, frequent conflicts among themselves, limited cooperation on a global scale," Pip read from his notes. "Typical pre-space civilization behavior patterns." This made Krell even more pessimistic. Species that couldn't even unite their own worlds rarely had the strength or wisdom needed for galactic citizenship. The tests would probably eliminate them in the first few minutes. "Schedule them for testing next week," Krell decided. "Prepare the standard documentation for another failure." As Krell walked through the station's corridors, he passed the memorial wall, a massive display showing the names of every species that had attempted the Crucible Protocol. 43,612 names carved in crystal, each representing an entire civilization that had dreamed of joining the stars but lacked the strength to survive the galaxy's harsh realities. The Zephyrians, who had shattered like glass under pressure variations. The Nebulans, whose gaseous bodies had dispersed in gravity fields. The mighty Karate, whose powerful exoskeletons had cracked under temperature extremes. Even the brilliant Mentari, whose incredible intelligence couldn't save them from radiation poisoning. Each failure reinforced the same lesson: the galaxy belonged to the strong. Only species that could survive anything had the right to walk among the stars. Krell paused at his favorite viewing window, looking out at the space lanes filled with ships from the 37 species that made up the Galactic Council. All of them had evolved on harsh worlds that had tested them for millions of years. All of them had earned their place through strength and endurance. The Thermians, who came from a world of constant volcanic activity. The Cryogens, whose ice planet had taught them to survive in conditions that would freeze most atmospheres solid. The Radiants, who had evolved near a pulsar and could withstand radiation that would kill other species instantly. These were the proven survivors, the species worthy of galactic citizenship. They had faced the worst the universe could offer and emerged stronger for it. "Sir," Pip approached cautiously, "I've been reviewing the data on these humans." "What about it?" "Their world, it's not as safe as we first thought." Pip held up his datapad with a worried expression. "They have something called natural disasters. Earthquakes that split the ground open. Volcanic eruptions that cover huge areas in ash. Storms with winds that can destroy buildings. floods that wash away entire cities. Krell glanced at the data but wasn't impressed. Sounds like standard geological activity. Nothing compared to what they'll face in the tests. They also have predators, sir. Creatures that hunt other creatures for food, including these humans. Natural selection. Common on most worlds. And diseases, sir. Tiny organisms that can kill millions of them at once. Krell waved a tentacle dismissively. If they survive to develop space travel, they've obviously dealt with these minor inconveniences. It won't help them in the Crucible. As he returned to his office, Krell felt the familiar weight of responsibility. The Crucible protocol wasn't cruel, it was necessary. The galaxy was no place for the weak. Better to discover a species' limitations in a controlled environment than to watch them die horribly when they encountered their first real cosmic threat. Tomorrow, he would watch another species fail. The humans would join the long list of the unworthy, and the galaxy would continue to be protected by the strong. The transport shuttle docked with the Galactic Council station with a soft thud that echoed through the airlock. Captain Jack Williams stepped out first, followed by his crew of 11 other humans. The artificial gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth normal, and the recycled air carried an odd metallic taste that reminded him of submarine duty. "Well, this is fancy," said Lieutenant Emma Davis, the mission's engineer, as she looked around at the crystalline walls that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Though I have to say, it's a bit stuffy in here. Could use some fresh air circulation." "Reminds me of that research station in Alaska," added Dr. Helen Parker, the team's medical officer. "Same kind of closed-in feeling, but at least that one had windows." Ambassador Krell waited for them in the reception chamber, his 6 eyes studying the humans with the same clinical interest he had shown thousands of other species. Behind him stood several other alien officials, their various appendages and sensory organs focused on the newcomers. What struck Krell immediately was how relaxed these humans appeared. Most species arrived in a state of nervous preparation, their representatives often spending hours in meditation, prayer, or frantic last-minute planning. These humans seemed to be treating their visit like a casual trip to see friends. "Captain Williams," Krell began formally, activating his translation device, "you have been informed of the nature of the Crucible Protocol. These tests are extremely dangerous. Over 40,000 species have attempted them. All have failed. Most did not survive. Do you understand what you are facing?" Jack grinned, an expression that made several of the alien officials step back nervously. "Absolutely, Ambassador. We've read all the briefing materials. The crew's been looking forward to this ever since we left Earth orbit." "Looking forward to it?" Krell's tentacles twitched with confusion. "These are trials designed to test the absolute limits of survival. Many consider them a form of controlled death sentence." "Oh, we know they're challenging," said Sergeant Mike Thompson, the team's survival specialist. "That's what makes them interesting. I haven't had a proper test since that winter training exercise in Greenland. This should be fun." Several of the alien observers made shocked chittering sounds. Pip, Krell's assistant, whispered urgently in the ambassador's ear. "Sir, they appear to be treating this as some form of entertainment." Krell studied the humans more carefully. They were chatting among themselves, pointing at various features of the station with obvious curiosity. One of them, a woman named Sarah Collins, was actually sketching the alien architecture in a small notebook. "These tests have claimed thousands of lives," Krell emphasized, hoping to make them understand the seriousness of their situation. "The pressure variations alone have crushed the strongest exoskeletons in the known galaxy. The temperature extremes have flash-frozen atmospheric gases and melted the most heat-resistant materials we know." "Sounds like deep-sea diving and spacewalks," commented Lieutenant Tom Foster, the mission pilot. "We do that kind of thing for training back home. Though I have to admit, combining them all sounds like quite a workout." Dr. Parker nodded enthusiastically. "I'm particularly interested in the radiation exposure test. We've done extensive research on cosmic radiation effects during long space flights. It'll be fascinating to see how our natural resistance compares to other species." Krell's breathing apparatus made a wheezing sound that indicated extreme confusion. "Natural resistance to radiation?" "Well, sure," Dr. Parker replied. "Humans have been dealing with solar radiation, cosmic rays, and natural radioactivity our entire evolutionary history. Our planet's magnetic field isn't perfect, and we've had to adapt. Plus, some of our people work in nuclear facilities, fly at high altitudes, or live in areas with high natural radiation levels." "Your people voluntarily expose themselves to radiation?" asked one of the alien officials in horror. "Sometimes," Jack shrugged. Occupational hazard for some jobs. Though we do take precautions, of course. Krell pulled up Earth's environmental data on his personal display and felt his heart skip a beat. He had reviewed this information before, but now he was reading it with new eyes. Earth wasn't the peaceful garden world he had assumed. It was a planet of constant natural disasters, extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, and radiation levels that would be considered hazardous on most civilized worlds. Your planet, Krell said slowly, experiences regular seismic activity, volcanic eruptions, massive storms, and temperature variations that span over 100 degrees. Yeah, Earth can be a bit rough sometimes, Emma agreed cheerfully. But that's just home, you know? You learn to deal with it. Build stronger houses, develop better weather prediction, have emergency plans. It keeps life interesting. And your people regularly venture into environments that would be lethal to most life forms. Ocean depths with crushing pressure, mountain peaks with thin atmosphere, polar regions with extreme cold. Adventure tourism is pretty popular, Mike laughed. Some folks pay good money for that kind of challenge. Though I suppose it's not for everyone. Krell was beginning to understand that these humans might be very different from other species he had tested. They weren't just surviving on their world, they were actively seeking out dangerous experiences for recreation. Very well, he announced, though his voice carried less confidence than usual. We will begin with the first test. Atmospheric pressure variation. The chamber will simulate the crushing depths of your deepest ocean trenches, followed by the near-vacuum conditions of space. Oh, like decompression training. Tom exclaimed happily. We all did plenty of that before the mission. This'll be a piece of cake. As the 12 humans filed into the testing chamber, still chatting casually about the technical specifications and sharing stories about similar experiences they'd had on Earth, Krell found himself wondering if he should prepare the standard failure documentation or if, for the first time in 3,000 years, he might need to draft something completely different. Ambassador Krell stared at his monitoring equipment in complete disbelief. The display screens showed readings that should have been impossible. He tapped the instruments with one of his tentacles, hoping they were malfunctioning. Run the diagnostic check again, he ordered his assistant Pip. Sir, I've already run it 7 times, Pip replied nervously. All equipment is working perfectly. Through the thick observation window, Krell could see the 12 humans inside the pressure chamber. They should have been dead within the first 30 seconds. The atmospheric pressure in that chamber was currently equivalent to being crushed under 10 miles of ocean water. It had liquefied the last 3 species that attempted this test. Instead, the humans were sitting in a circle, playing what appeared to be some kind of word game. I spy with my little eye, something that begins with M, said Dr. Parker cheerfully, her voice coming through the communication system with perfect clarity. Metal, guessed Lieutenant Davis. Nope. Keep trying. This is impossible, whispered Council Member Vorthak, his crystal body vibrating with confusion. No organic life form can survive those pressure levels. Captain Williams noticed the aliens watching through the observation window and waved at them with a friendly smile. The pressure's quite nice in here, his voice crackled through the speakers. Feels just like that deep-sea research dive I did in the Pacific. Though I have to say, your atmospheric composition is interesting. Very clean and well-filtered. Krell pulled up Earth's environmental data again, studying it with new attention. The numbers made his breathing apparatus wheeze in shock. Earth's atmospheric pressure at sea level was already higher than most civilized worlds considered safe. And these humans regularly travel to the bottom of their oceans, where pressure increased to levels that would crush most known materials. Sir, Pip's voice was barely audible, they're requesting the next phase of testing. What? The pressure test isn't scheduled to complete for another 3 hours. They say they're getting bored waiting around. Krell authorized the temperature extremes test, expecting to finally see these strange creatures meet their limits. The chamber's temperature began climbing rapidly, reaching levels that would melt most metal alloys. Then it plunged to temperatures so cold that most atmospheric gases would freeze solid. The humans responded by removing their outer jackets during the heat phase and doing jumping exercises during the cold phase. Not as hot as that summer in Arizona, commented Sergeant Thompson, wiping sweat from his forehead. At least this heat is dry. Much more comfortable than humidity. And the cold phase reminds me of winter training in Siberia, added Dr. Parker. Though this is actually warmer than that was. Maybe -40? -50? Quite pleasant, really. Council member Zeltron, whose species originated from a frozen moon, made shocked clicking sounds. They consider temperatures that would freeze our atmosphere to be pleasant. Krell was now studying Earth's climate data with growing alarm. These humans regularly experience temperature variations that spanned ranges most species would find lethal. Their planet had deserts hot enough to kill most life forms and polar regions cold enough to freeze organic matter solid. Yet humans not only survived in these environments, they chose to live there. Sir, Pip approached cautiously, they've completed the temperature test ahead of schedule and are asking for the next challenge. The toxicity test came next. The chamber filled with atmospheric gases that would burn the lungs of most species and corrode their internal organs. Previous test subjects had died in agony within minutes of exposure. The humans sniffed the air experimentally. Bit of sulfur in the mix, observed Dr. Parker professionally. And some interesting hydrocarbon compounds. Reminds me of the air near those volcanic vents in Iceland. Better than the smog in Beijing during my last visit there, added Lieutenant Davis. Much better visibility. Krell was now frantically reviewing every piece of data he could find about Earth. What he discovered made him question everything he thought he knew about habitable worlds. Earth wasn't just dangerous, it was a nightmare planet that most species would consider uninhabitable. The atmosphere contained reactive gases that would poison most life forms. The surface was regularly bombarded by radiation from space. Massive storms with winds strong enough to flatten buildings occurred regularly. The planet was geologically active, with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that could destroy entire cities. Most horrifying of all, the dominant life forms on this world actually hunted and killed each other for survival. Yet these humans had not just survived on this death world, they had thrived. They had built civilizations, developed technology, and even found ways to make their dangerous environment more dangerous by choice. By the time the testing reached the radiation exposure phase, the trial that had sterilized 17 different species, Krell was beyond shocked. He was witnessing something that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. The humans emerged from the radiation chamber after 6 hours of exposure that should have killed them in minutes. They were discussing something called sunbathing, and comparing the experience to medical procedures they had back home. The radiation levels were quite manageable, Dr. Parker reported cheerfully. Similar to what we get during solar flare activity, or maybe a long flight through the Van Allen belts. Some of our people work in much higher radiation environments than that. Your people work in higher radiation? Krell asked weakly. Oh sure. Nuclear power plants, space stations, research facilities. We've developed pretty good protection protocols over the years. As the humans completed test after test with casual ease, Krell realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. These weren't just survivors, they were products of a world so harsh that it had forged them into beings capable of treating the galaxy's most feared trials as minor inconveniences. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were laughing at challenges that had destroyed thousands of civilizations. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the first time in over 1,000 years. Representatives from all 37 member species filled the Great Chamber, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic sounds that the translation system struggled to process. Ambassador Krell stood at the center podium, his 6 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. In his 3 centuries of service, he had never felt so uncertain about anything. Honored council members, he began, his voice amplified throughout the massive hall, we face an unprecedented situation. These humans have not simply passed our tests. They have made our most deadly trials look like children's games. High Councillor Zephys, the eldest member of the council, raised one of her crystalline appendages. This is impossible, Ambassador Krell. No species in recorded galactic history has survived even the first test, let alone completed multiple trials with ease. I have reviewed the data 17 times, Krell replied. I have had our best technicians examine every instrument. The results are accurate. These humans completed 7 different survival tests in less time than it takes most species to prepare for just one. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Council member Vorthak's crystal body chimed with agitation. There must be some form of technological enhancement. Hidden devices, genetic modifications, something that explains this impossibility. We conducted the most thorough scans in our capability, Krell responded. They are completely biological beings with no technological modifications. They are surviving our ultimate challenges using nothing but their natural evolutionary adaptations. The debate continued for hours. Some council members suggested the humans were using unknown technology. Others wondered if the test equipment had been sabotaged. A few even proposed that these creatures might not be real at all, but some kind of advanced illusion designed to make the council look foolish. Finally, High Councillor Zephyrs called for silence with a sound like breaking crystal. Very well. If these humans believe they are superior to every other form of life in the galaxy, let them prove it. Activate the final protocol. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. The final protocol was theoretical, a combination of every lethal environmental challenge the Council's scientists had ever conceived, all applied simultaneously. It existed only in the archives, designed as the ultimate deterrent that no species would ever be foolish enough to attempt. Honored Counselor, Krell said carefully, the final protocol has never been tested. Our calculations suggest that nothing organic could survive even 30 seconds of exposure. Then these humans will finally learn their limitations, Zephyrs replied coldly. Prepare the chamber. 2 hours later, Krell found himself in the master observation room, surrounded by monitoring equipment that had never been used for anything but simulations. The final protocol chamber was a sphere of polished metal, designed to create the most hostile environment possible. Sir, Pip whispered nervously, the humans have been informed of the test parameters. They accepted immediately. What was their response? Captain Williams asked if they could bring snacks. Krell's tentacles drooped with a mixture of admiration and despair. Even facing certain death, these creatures maintained their incomprehensible optimism. The 12 humans entered the chamber through the heavily shielded airlock. The moment the door sealed, the final protocol began. Crushing atmospheric pressure that could flatten starship hulls. Temperature extremes that ranged from stellar core heat to absolute zero. Toxic gases that would dissolve organic matter. Radiation levels that would sterilize entire planets. Gravitational fields strong enough to compress carbon into diamonds. Electromagnetic interference that should have stopped their hearts instantly. Krell watched the sensor readings climb to lethal levels and waited for the inevitable. Every species that had ever lived would have died in the first few seconds. The humans would finally meet their match, and the natural order of the galaxy would be restored. Instead, something happened that no one in galactic history had ever witnessed in a survival trial. The humans looked around at their impossible situation, assessed the multiple threats surrounding them, and did something that defied all logic. They organized themselves into teams. Right then, came Captain Williams's voice through the static-filled communication system. Dr. Parker, you take readings on the atmospheric composition. Lieutenant Davis, see what you can do about evening out that heat distribution. Thompson, you're with me on pressure management. They weren't panicking. They weren't even particularly worried. They were treating the galaxy's ultimate death trap like a group project. How are they still alive? Council member Vorthak asked in a voice like breaking glass. I don't know, Krell admitted, watching his instruments show readings that shouldn't exist. For the next 6 hours, the humans systematically addressed each lethal challenge while helping their teammates who were struggling. When Sergeant Thompson had difficulty with the radiation exposure, Dr. Parker shared her water ration and helped him find a position with slightly better shielding. When Lieutenant Foster's equipment malfunctioned during the electromagnetic phase, the entire team worked together to jury-rig a solution using spare parts from their clothing. They turned the ultimate individual survival test into a collaborative problem-solving exercise. Sir, Pip's voice was filled with awe, they're not just surviving. According to the sensors, they've actually improved the environmental conditions inside the chamber. What? They found ways to redirect the heat flow, stabilize the pressure variations, and create electromagnetic dead zones for protection. They're engineering solutions in real time. After the scheduled 6-hour test period ended, the humans politely requested permission to continue because they had just figured out how to optimize the chamber's life support systems and wanted to test their improvements. The galaxy's ultimate trial had become their latest engineering project. The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. For the first time in 3,000 years of recorded history, every member sat in stunned silence as they tried to process what they had witnessed. The impossible had happened, and none of them knew what it meant for the future of galactic civilization. Ambassador Krell stood before the assembly, holding a datapad that contained readings he still couldn't quite believe. Beside him, Captain Williams and his crew of humans waited patiently, seemingly unaware that they had just shattered every assumption about survival and evolution that the galaxy had held sacred. Honored Council members, Krell began slowly, we must discuss what this means for our understanding of advanced civilization. High Councillor Zephyrs raised one crystalline appendage, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. What it means, Ambassador, is that we have been wrong about everything. The admission sent ripples of shock through the assembled delegates. For millennia, The Galactic Council had defined advancement through individual strength and survival capability. Only the toughest species, those who could endure the harshest conditions alone, were considered worthy of membership in their exclusive club. Captain Williams stepped forward respectfully. With all due respect, Counselor, I think you might have your definition of advanced civilization a bit backwards. Explain yourself, human. Dr. Parker joined her captain in the center of the chamber. You've been testing individuals against impossible challenges, measuring advancement purely by survival ability. But real advancement isn't about surviving alone. It's about helping each other thrive together. Our species has faced extinction many times throughout our history, added Lieutenant Davis. Ice ages that froze our world solid. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years. Asteroid impacts that could have wiped out all life. Diseases that killed millions at a time. Sergeant Thompson nodded. We didn't survive because any individual human was particularly strong or tough. We survived because we learned to work together. We shared knowledge, resources, and protection. We helped our weakest members become stronger. The alien delegates listened with growing amazement as the humans described their approach to survival. Instead of competing against each other for limited resources, they had developed systems of cooperation that made the entire species more resilient. Council member Vorthak's crystal body chimed with confusion. But the strong must lead. The weak must be left behind. This is the natural order of evolution. Is it though? Asked Dr. Parker gently. Look around this chamber. You've built an incredible galactic civilization spanning thousands of worlds. But how many brilliant minds have you lost along the way? How many species could have contributed amazing discoveries or solutions, but were eliminated because they couldn't pass individual survival tests? Engineer Davis pulled out a small device and projected a holographic display. We've been reviewing your historical records. Over 40,000 species have been rejected from council membership. Just think about the scientific advances, cultural innovations, and technological breakthroughs you might have missed. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For 3 millennia, the council had been excluding potentially valuable members based on tests that measured only one narrow definition of worthiness. What do you propose? High Counselor Zephyrs asked finally. Captain Williams smiled. That strange human expression that the aliens were beginning to understand meant something wonderful was about to happen. Let us help you redesign the evaluation process. Instead of testing who can survive alone, let's identify who can contribute to something greater than themselves. We have some ideas about cooperation, problem-solving, and adaptive thinking that might interest you, Dr. Parker added enthusiastically. And would love to learn from all those species you've been turning away. I bet they have incredible insights and capabilities that you've never had the chance to discover. Lieutenant Foster stepped forward. Some of the greatest advances in human history came from our most unlikely contributors. People who weren't the strongest or toughest, but who could think differently, create solutions, or bring communities together. Krell found himself nodding slowly. Throughout his centuries of administering the Crucible Protocol, he had often wondered about the species they rejected. Many had shown remarkable intelligence, creativity, or social cooperation before failing the physical trials. The Mentari, for example, he said thoughtfully. They failed the radiation test, but their mathematical abilities were extraordinary. The Zephyrians shattered under pressure, but their crystalline technology was unlike anything we'd ever seen. Exactly. Dr. Parker exclaimed. Imagine what the galaxy could accomplish if all those different capabilities were working together instead of being eliminated by arbitrary survival tests. High Counselor Zephyrs was quiet for a long moment, her ancient mind processing possibilities that had never occurred to her before. You propose to replace our ancient protocols with cooperation trials. Not replace, Captain Williams said diplomatically. Evolve. Keep what works, but expand the definition of what makes a species valuable to galactic civilization. Over the following weeks, the humans worked with council scientists to develop new evaluation procedures. Instead of isolated survival tests, they created collaborative challenges that required multiple species to work together. Communication exercises that valued different forms of intelligence. Problem-solving scenarios that rewarded creativity over brute strength. 6 months later, the first reformed integration protocol welcomed 17 new species into the Galactic Council. The humans served as coordination specialists, helping each species find ways to contribute their unique abilities to galactic civilization. Ambassador Krell reviewed applications from hundreds of previously rejected species, many eager for a second chance to prove their worth. The Mentari were developing new mathematical models for faster-than-light travel. The Zephyrians were creating crystal-based computers that could process information at unprecedented speeds. Dozens of other species were contributing innovations that no one had imagined possible. As he watched representatives from 87 different species working together in the expanded council chambers, Krell realized that the humans had accomplished something unprecedented. They hadn't just passed an impossible test. They had transformed the very definition of what it meant to be an advanced civilization. The Deathworlders had taught the galaxy that true strength came not from surviving alone, but from helping others survive together.